Special enemies are such an important part to a Call of Duty Zombies map. It can either make or break it depending on how well balanced they are. We've had some incredible bosses throughout COD history, we've also had some terrible ones. So I thought it would be fun to go through and rank every single Call of Duty Zombies game by how good these special enemies and bosses are within them. I'm taking pretty much everything into account with this ranking, the actual design of the bosses themselves, whether it's the visual design or the gameplay design, the balance and the difficulty of the bosses, how they are integrated with the maps themselves, how unique they are. Pretty much anything you can think of revolving around special enemies in zombies is being taken into account with this video. Special enemies are basically any enemy in a zombies experience that isn't the regular zombie. I am not including boss fights though, because that's an entirely different beast that I'll definitely do a video on in the future, but when it comes to this video, it is specifically ranking each game based on its special enemies, also known as boss zombies. Coming in dead last in the number 12 spot is Advanced Warfare's Exo Zombies. The biggest issue with this game is the special enemies. They are obnoxiously terrible. The worst offender of this is, of course, the EMZs, which are the electric zombies that disable your exosuit. These guys are so frustrating. It kind of makes sense why they're in the mode, because I do think the mode would be a little bit too easy without them, but there's no reason why there should be so many of these constantly spawning in on every single Exo Zombies map that constantly disables your exosuit, makes your entire screen visually a mess, and just kind of makes the experience quite frustrating. I do not like these guys. They're probably one of the worst special enemies of all time, and it's one of the only special enemies in zombies history that almost ruins an entire game. I definitely think Exo Zombies would be much better without these guys. They're not the only terrible bosses in this game though. There's also the infected zombies, also known as the host zombies. These guys are very annoying because they're also on every single map, and they are dedicated to these specific infected rounds where when they hit you, you have to go to these decontamination zones to basically save yourself. If you don't go to those zones, you will die. And it's not the worst thing in the world, but I honestly just get annoyed by it every single time this round pops up, because I have to stop whatever I'm doing when these guys come around and go all the way to the decontamination zone, because it's pretty much impossible to go through a whole round of the infected rounds without getting hit by one of these guys. It is very tricky to do that. And I do wish that they at least gave you a reward if you did. It would be pretty cool if it gave you like a free weapon upgrade if you were able to go the whole round without being hit by these guys once. But they didn't give you anything like that. You weren't given any special rewards. The reward was just not having to go all the way to the other side of the map to go to the decontamination zone. But like I said, I do it anyways because I'm expecting to probably get hit. I don't mind them as much on Carrier because there's multiple decontamination zones on that map, so it definitely makes it not as big of a deal, but it still is not a system that I like all that much. I don't enjoy fighting these bosses. And this game also commits the cardinal sin of just keeping way too many special enemies on every single map and having the exact same ones on a way too many map. Instead of bringing in new special enemies and then getting rid of some of the prior ones, they do introduce some new ones, and then they also keep a bunch of the old ones. So by the time you get to Carrier and Descent, there's just way too many special enemies on these maps. And I do like having a lot of special enemies on maps, only when they aren't thrown into pretty much every single round. And that's kind of what happens on these maps. There's just way too many different things going on, way too many different types of special enemies, and I don't think it makes for the best possible experience. It also takes away from the map unique special enemies, which I think is a very important thing to a zombies experience. There are a few here, like I said, on Descent because it was the last map, so by the time they were adding the bosses on Descent, of course they didn't retroactively add them to the previous maps, but still, the bosses from Outbreak, for example, none of them are only on that map because they carry them over to the other maps as well. There is one positive I can say for the special enemies of Exo Zombies. I really love the Goliath Zombie. The Goliath Zombie is only on a few of the maps, but when it appears, I think it's very fun to go up against. It's actually quite a difficult and challenging boss, but it's not obnoxious. It's not annoying to go up against. It's actually just a fun challenge. So whenever you get something like that in Exo Zombies, I think it's definitely worth pointing out. Before we get into the rest of the video, I'd like to show off these really cool Call of Duty Zombies themed Control Freak thumbsticks that will help your accuracy in Call of Duty, but are also just incredibly comfortable and look amazing. And they even come with a Speed Cola and Deadshot Daiquiri perk can, which is so cool. The Speed Cola edition will also give you a digital code for an in-game cosmetic weapon charm in Black Ops 6 Zombies. Use code XpertFusion at the link in the description for 12% off on this and any other Control Freak products. Now let's get back to the video. In the number 11 spot, World at War Zombies. Now this one is very hard to rank because obviously there is quite literally only one special enemy in this game. It was was the first zombies mode of all time, so of course I wasn't expecting a bunch of special enemies. But how can I include it high on the list when there really isn't much to it? I know some people actually prefer having less special enemies in the game. They only really want to fight against the regular zombies, but I think special enemies add a lot to the maps. And when this game only has 2 maps with special enemies being the Hellhounds, I can't really rank it that high. I just can't. Of course, it's the first game, and I'm taking that into account. If I wasn't taking that into account, it would obviously be in last place, but I just don't think I can personally rank it any higher than this. The Hellhounds are really cool, though. They are terrifying in this game. Probably the scariest version of the Hellhounds we've ever seen. It was very often that I would die to the Hellhounds, especially on Rees. So I do love them, but like I said, there's really not much to talk about here, so I can't rank it any higher. In the 10th spot is Modern Warfare 3 Zombies. So the biggest issue with this game is simply the fact that there was no brand new special enemies in this game. They were quite literally all reused from Black Ops Cold War. You had the Manglers, the Hellhounds, Disciples, Mimics. Of course, you did have the Mega Abominations, which technically were a little new because they were bigger versions of the regular Abominations, but I still wouldn't call that completely new. It's still taking an older concept and just making it bigger. So I personally was not a fan of that. I wanted to see some new stuff in this game. I think every single new Zombies game should have new stuff, and I get this was trying to just be like a big sandbox of zombies content, but I feel like if you're going to do open world zombies as a sandbox, that should be tied to other round-based experiences that introduce new content. The fact that this game had not a lot of new stuff was a pretty huge problem. I also wish they didn't make it so many of the special enemies from this mode spawn on you pretty much all of the time, especially if you're in the tier 3 zones or in the Dark Ether. You will pretty much have almost every single special enemy just constantly attacking you. And I think they should have split it up a bit, maybe have some special enemies exclusive to specific areas of the map. The only times they did that is with the Mega Abomination that only ever appears in tier 3. And of course, you also have the Mercenaries, which are the AI soldiers that only appear at strongholds and the little campsites around the map. But I do think this mode could have benefited quite a bit by having less special enemy spam. There's definitely other ways to make the mode more difficult. The reason they probably decided to do it is because obviously in an open world setting, you're going to have pretty open spaces to train in, and it would be maybe a little too easy if they weren't constantly throwing everything at you. But I think there's got to be other ways to make them more interesting. Maybe just make less special enemies that come at you, but make them more powerful, make them more deadly. And why do you need systems like armor? Maybe get rid of armor and make it so there's less special enemies, but they will kill you a lot faster because there's no armor. There's definitely ways to balance it in a more interesting way, in my opinion. The way they did it, I personally wasn't a huge fan of. And getting back into the conversation of the Mercenaries, I wasn't a huge fan of these guys. I thought they were interesting in some places, but at the end of the day, you're playing zombies. You want to fight zombies type enemies. You do not want to fight soldiers. It just kind of makes it feel like you're playing DMZ from Modern Warfare 2. But there were some instances that I did like these guys, specifically with the strongholds. I thought it was kind of fun going into a stronghold and trying to take it over. That was a pretty fun experience to have because it was quite challenging, but I didn't like having to fight against these guys in the tier 1 and 2 contracts. At a certain point through the game's life cycle, I wasn't really doing tier 1 and 2 contracts anymore because you got to a certain point where you just kind of went straight to tier 3, and that was pretty much how you did most of your games. But early on in the life cycle, when you're doing the tier 1 and 2 contracts, you're going to have a lot of moments where you have to fight mercenaries, and in my opinion, sometimes they're kind of annoying, especially the one that has the riot shield. That guy is one of the most annoying special enemies probably of all time. He's not that hard to fight against, he's just really annoying. So overall, this game just doesn't have a lot of uniqueness when it comes to its special enemies. I think their boss fights were decent, but like I said before, this video is not about boss fights. It is just about these special enemies themselves, and like I said, not really a fan of them. In the number 9 spot, Vanguard Zombies. So this game honestly didn't have any frustrating special enemies, but it just didn't have a lot. There was only 3 special enemies in the entire game. You had Zabala, the Boom Schreiers, and Storm Krieger. So it wasn't a lot of variety there when it comes to the enemies you were fighting in this mode, but I don't think any of these were that frustrating. I think a lot of people didn't like Storm Krieger at first because, of course, he does have a gun that he shoots you with, but I personally actually kind of enjoyed that challenge. I like trying to dodge his shots, and it is kind of interesting having an enemy that straight up just has a gun to shoot you with. The Boom Schreiers were not original whatsoever. We've seen special enemies like this before where they just kind of run up to you and explode. And then Zabala was pretty unique, the way she teleported around and the fact that you basically had to go for headshots, and there were certain phases where she was immune. I actually quite liked Zabala. She was pretty interesting, but like I said, I couldn't rank this game that high because there just isn't a lot of variety here. There's not many special enemies to go up against. In the number 8 spot, unfortunately, is going to be Black Ops 6. This game has been so disappointing when it comes to its special enemies, and we only have one map left with DLC 4. I really don't think it's gonna suddenly fix all the problems I had with special enemies in this game, and the main issue has been the lack of new special enemies. There's been so many special enemies they've been consistently reusing, not even just from previous games, but also just within the same game itself. They keep using the same special enemies on multiple maps when a lot of us want to see map-specific special enemies, and they just have not been doing it all that often in this game. I mean, let's just look at these special rounds, for example. They have been either the vermin or parasites for the first 4 maps of this game. Finally, with Shattered Veil, they gave us something different with the toxic zombies, which I did appreciate that quite a bit. Shattered Veil is definitely an exception when it comes to how they handled special enemies in this game. I wouldn't say it's necessarily perfect with it, because of course, they don't really have many new things in this map either, but it was definitely much better than how the maps previously handled it, because at least we had a different special round with the toxic zombies. But having vermin and parasites on almost every single map is just too much. I don't want to see that. And people were comparing them to hellhounds and saying, well, you didn't have a problem with hellhounds being on almost every map back in the day. But that wasn't actually the case. If you go look back at Black Ops 1, hellhounds were in a few of the maps, maybe, but not almost every single map in the game. And another big problem was the special enemy spam, especially on some of the earlier maps. This definitely happened on the Tomb. The Tomb was just filled with special enemies all over the place. People were getting so frustrated with them at that point. They have nerfed the special enemy spam a bit over time. Like I remember at launch, Liberty Falls was a mess when it comes to the amount of manglers that spawned in. Even the special rounds were like really long with just an insane amount of vermin that just kept popping up. And eventually they did tone that down a bit. They have done a good job with listening to fan feedback. And then of course, Shattered Veil has the least amount of special enemy spam out of any of the maps in this game. So again, they were definitely listening to feedback. And I totally understand why they wanted to do special enemy spam in the first place. It's because they want to make the game challenging in some way. But again, like I said for Modern Warfare Zombies, that's not the best way to make the game more challenging. There's other ways to make the game more challenging, and I wish they would do that instead of just throwing a bunch of different special enemies at the player, especially when it's special enemies that we keep seeing again and again and again. And even when it comes to the new special enemies in this game, I don't really like them that much. First of all, we have the Amalgam, which of course was on quite a few maps in this game. It's on Terminus, Citadel, the Tomb, and sort of on Shattered Veil. It at least can appear on Shattered Veil, although it doesn't appear nearly as frequently on Shattered Veil as it does on the other maps. And the Amalgam is just not that interesting of a special enemy because its attacks are very similar to bosses we've already seen before. It has a grapple attack, which we've seen on many different bosses. I mean, literally the Mimic is in this game, and that's a special enemy that also does the grapple attack. So having 2 different special enemies that do the grapple attack on the same map is kind of ridiculous, and it's probably one of the most frustrating attacks of any special enemy ever. And it also has multiple heads on its body, which is very similar to the Thrashers from Black Ops 3. So in general, this boss doesn't really feel that unique overall. The Doppelgast is a little bit more interesting because the way it moves is pretty unique. The way it like frantically moves around, but I don't really like it that much because visually it doesn't look that different than the Mimics or the Amalgams. They all kind of look the same. They're kind of like these fleshy tentacle creatures that just, I mean, they don't look that unique. I want to see very different looking special enemies, stuff that Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4, Infinite Warfare did, which of course we will talk about later in this video, but this game just doesn't really hold up to those games because it's not really trying to go in really different directions with its special enemies. With few exceptions, I also don't really feel like most of these special enemies feel that thematically connected to the map. I really miss when some of those games that I mentioned before, like Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4, and Infinite Warfare, had a lot of special enemies that fit the theming of the map. Just as an example, you go to Black Ops 4's 9. That map has the Tigers, the Gladiators, the Brawlers. They all fit the map so damn well, whereas something like the Doppelgast on Citadel de Mor doesn't really feel thematically perfect to that map experience. Now, it's not like it doesn't fit the map whatsoever, because the Doppelgast is made to be very generic, so it would fit on multiple maps, and I think that's kind of the point. They know they wanted to reuse these special enemies, so if they were to make a very unique special enemy that is thematically appropriate to a medieval castle, then it wouldn't work as well on a map like Shattered Veil, so they wanted to design the Doppelgast in that way, but I think that's kind of boring. I would have loved to have seen a medieval knight as a special enemy on Citadel de Mor. That would have been really, really cool. Even if it was kind of a reskin of the Mangler in a sense, I would have been okay with it. Maybe have the Mangler but replace its arm cannon with a medieval style cannon and give it like knight armor. I think that would have been incredible and it would have fit the map so well. One thing I do kind of like about the special enemies in this game is the whole idea of the transformations between a few of them. For example, the vermin can transform to the parasite, which can also transform to the doppelgast and the amalgam, and you kind of see that pretty clearly when you do the donut pet side Easter egg on Shattered Veil. You can actually see this transformation happening for yourself, but to be honest, on the other maps, I don't really think about this transformation that much. I'm not like thinking about it in my mind. If it happens, it kind of just happens, and I don't really see it happen usually. So although it's a cool idea, I don't think it really affects the maps in a significant way, at least for me personally. The idea behind it's pretty cool though. In the number 7 spot, Black Ops 1. This game is very hit or miss when it comes to its special enemies. Some of these special enemies are some of my favorite of all time, whereas some of the other ones are some of my least favorite of all time, which is why I'm putting it pretty much in the middle of this list. I absolutely love George Romero on Call of the Dead. I think he's one of the best special enemies of all time. Just having this person follow you around the entire game until, of course, you can kill him. And if you do kill him, you do get some pretty cool rewards out of it. You get a free perk, and you also get the Wunderwaffe, assuming you've already done the Easter egg. You don't have to keep doing the Easter egg. Of course, if you've done it at least once before, you will always get the Wunderwaffe from him after killing him. Then he will go away for a few rounds and then come back later. And I love how he changes up the gameplay. He makes it so you can't camp effectively. You have to keep moving around the map, and killing him is a pretty fun journey to go on. Of course, he has a lot of health, so it makes you want to pick out specific weapons that are known for it being easier to kill him with. Then there's the Shangri-La monkeys. I really enjoy these guys because, of course, they can pick up power-ups and change them to different power-ups. So maybe you don't like the power-up that dropped on the floor. Like, for example, if it's a carpenter, you can wait for a monkey to pick it up and it will change it to something else. And if you kill it at the perfect time, you can get literally whatever power-up you want in the game. You can also get free perks out of this as well. I really love when they have free perks being earned from the special enemies. And then, of course, there's also Hellhounds on a few of the maps in this game, which, of course, Hellhounds are a classic. And you also have the Pentagon Thief on 5, which I'm very hit or miss with this guy because part of me does really love the unique mechanic of this map where you can actually lose your gun if he goes up to you and takes it. But he can also be kind of frustrating at times, so I'm not sure if I absolutely love him, but I do think he is pretty cool as a unique part of 5. He's definitely very terrifying to go up against. The Space Monkeys on Ascension, I think, are also kind of in the same boat as the Pentagon Thief, where I don't really like them as special enemies, but at the same time, I do think they do pose an interesting challenge to the player, where you're going to be losing a lot of your perks most of the time you play Ascension. It's very hard to keep all your perks. You can do it, it's possible, but chances are they're going to be taking your perks most of the time when you're playing this game. And then there's the Nova Crawlers, which of course appear on a few of the maps in this game as well, and I'm just not a fan of Nova Crawlers. I've really never been a fan of them. They're not in that many zombies games, but when they're there, I'm just not a fan. I think they kind of mess up the flow of your training, and they of course emit that gas that kind of messes with your vision a little bit when you walk through it right after killing it, and I've never been a fan of that. It's one of my least favorite things about Kino der Toten, actually. And there's also the Astronaut on Moon, which is also a special enemy I do not like. Him taking your perks is a really annoying. I don't find that to be fun whatsoever, especially because you could be coming around a corner and out of nowhere he's just right there and there's really not much you can do about it. So I'm not a fan of him. So this game is really hit or miss overall when it comes to its special enemies, but I do like that most of the special enemies in this game are map specific and some of them have some really cool unique abilities to them. In number 6 spot is surprisingly going to be Black Ops Cold War. So obviously, I think Black Ops 6 is better than Black Ops Cold War in most ways. I think it does pretty much everything else better, but the special enemies is one thing that I do think Cold War did better. Mainly because most of the special enemies being added to this game were actually unique at the time. They were actually giving us a lot of cool new ideas that of course has been reused a bunch since then, but in this game itself, most of them were new. Of course, we had the Megaton, which I don't think it's like the coolest boss ever, but I think it is an interesting concept that when you kill the first version of it, it splits into 2 other bosses that you now have to take out. The Plague Hounds were an interesting remix of Hellhounds. The Mimics were really cool. As much as I don't like Mimics anymore, I did really like them when they were first added. The fact that they kind of act as loot on the ground and then they come up out of nowhere and kind of give you a bit of a jump scare. I kind of like that idea. The Manglers returned in this game for the first time since Garad Krovi, which nowadays I don't like Manglers anymore. anymore because they've been so overused, but when they were first brought back in Firebase C, I thought it was pretty cool. The Disciples, of course, were pretty cool as well. The Tormentors, the Tempests, the regular Abominations on Forsaken. There's just so much variety to the bosses in this game, and they don't reuse them too much within each other. Of course, some of the bosses are reused, but a lot of them do stay on their own map, and there actually is a lot of diversity there. So I definitely did enjoy Black Ops Cold War's variety more. But do I think it was perfect? No, of course not. I definitely think this game did still have a special enemy spam problem where there was just way too many special enemies being thrown at you at once. Even if the maps were more unique with them, you still had way too many of them being thrown at the player way too frequently. Black Ops Cold War was a much easier game overall though, so it's not really like that made it any harder, but it still was something I wanted to mention. And just like I said before with Black Ops 6, I don't think these special enemies were that thematically appropriate to each map. Some of them were, but some of them felt like they didn't need to be on that map. They could have been on any map and it would have worked just the same. I felt like we needed more special enemies that really did feel like they came from that map. They had to be on that map. But like I said before, Black Ops 4 did great with that, Black Ops 3 did great with that, Infinite Warfare did great with that. I would love to see more of that, and I feel like this game didn't really do a lot of that. In the number 5 spot, World War II Zombies. This is a placement that is even kind of surprising for me because if you asked me this a few years ago, I would have said one of the biggest issues about World War II Zombies was the special enemies. I thought they were very annoying. I thought most of them were quite frustrating. But over time, I have learned different strategies and different ways of dealing with the special enemies in this game, and I don't really find them to be annoying anymore. I find them to be quite challenging, but not in a way where they're annoying, in a way where you can learn how to defeat them. You can learn how to outrun them. You can learn how to prevent them from killing you. And I actually really enjoy them now. But unfortunately, there was a huge problem with this game where it did have some of the other issues I've already been talking about, where way too many of the special enemies were reused on multiple maps. I'm okay with that here or there. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's the end of the world if you see a couple of bosses appear on multiple maps, but they did have like the pests on every single map. The Wustlings were on every single map except for USS Mount Olympus. And a few of the other special enemies were just always on every single map. Something like the Bomber, I didn't really mind being on every single map because that was a very generic special enemy that easily could work on every map. But something like the Wustling just should not have been on almost every single map in the game. I thought that was definitely an issue. But I absolutely loved how the bosses actually work in this game in terms of the gameplay. They are so different than one another, and their attacks are so different and unique. For example, the Wustling is meant to be the boss that just kind of sits in the back and is very, very slow, and you don't always want to go after it right away because, like I said, it is pretty far away from you usually, so you can kind of take your time with it. You don't have to go after it right away, but once you start attacking it, it will start rushing you, so then it's actually going to be quite challenging. And I love the fact that the weak spot of the Wustling is on its back, so if you actually let it rush you and then it goes past you, if you quickly turn around and shoot it in its back, you will kill it much faster than you would if you were just shooting it in the front. I love stuff like that with bosses. It's a very unique thing that makes it more fun to fight against. The Bomber is something you definitely want to be careful with as well, because let's say you're trying to hold a zombie for the end of the round, you don't want to kill the Bomber when it's right next to another zombie. But you can also use the Bombers to your advantage to help you weaken other zombies around you. If you're trying to kill the zombies around you, you can shoot the Bomber, which will then result in the zombies around it being exploded. Or you can try to shoot the zombie without shooting the bomb, making it so the bomb drops on the floor, and then you now have a bomb on the floor that you can use later on if you want to shoot it when the zombies walk over it. Stuff like that's pretty cool as well. I don't necessarily love the fact that a couple of the other special enemies in this game are really, really fast, like the Moichulars and the Gekok. They're incredibly fast. The Corpse Eaters are also really fast as well, but there are ways of dealing with them. Like I said, you can defeat them before they get to you. The Gekok and Corpse Eaters specifically are quite weak, so you can definitely kill them before they start hitting you. The Moichulars don't spawn in as frequently as those other guys because, of course, they only spawn in when there's the fog rolling in through the darkest shore, so it is quite terrifying when they do come in, and it is pretty hard to fight them, but you don't necessarily have to. You don't have to kill them. If you just avoid them, then you will be okay. So I kind of like how that works as well, where yes, they could be frustrating, but if you know how to deal with them, then they aren't nearly as bad. By far my favorite thing about these special enemies is the visual appearance of them. They are probably the coolest looking special enemies we've ever seen. They went so hard when it comes to the designs of them. It's just straight up body horror in the best way possible. And I also love the introductions of these special enemies. They did a great job with really making it so your first time seeing these special enemies is something that you will never forget. For example, the Brenner, the first time the Brenner spawns in on the Final Reich, it is so so cool. You're literally doing the main quest itself, and out of nowhere, this giant dude with the flamethrower just appears and just starts shooting his flamethrower in the sky, making this loud noise, and he just comes right at you. And it's so cool how it's presented. You see the corpse eater for the first time when you actually walk into Thule itself. It just kind of like drops from the sky, and you just now see what this guy can do. You see him literally sucking the soul out of zombies around him. So stuff like that is just really awesome, the way they introduce these special enemies. They did not mess around with that. I do think if they didn't throw in the Wuslings on almost every map, as well as with the pests and a couple of the other special enemies, this probably would be a top 3 zombies game when it comes to its special enemies. But overall, I do think it definitely does deserve credit. I think a lot of people definitely hate on it for the special enemies quite often. But like I said before, I think it's just because they're quite challenging. And a lot of people don't necessarily love challenges if they don't really know how to get past them. But that's why you just got to take some time to learn it. In the number 4 spot, Infinite Warfare Zombies. So when I was talking about before that I really like when special enemies are thematically appropriate to the map, this game does it so well. Obviously, you have the zombie clowns that fits Spaceland so well. You're in a theme park, of course, clowns are going to fit it. There's the zombie brute, which is basically like a mascot for the theme park that also fits Spaceland very well. Raven the Redwoods has the slasher and the Sasquatches. I don't really know what you call them. People call them Bigfoot. People call them gorillas. I just call them Sasquatches. But those obviously fit the 90s horror aesthetic very, very well. Challenge Shuffle has the ninjas and the roller skaters, which I would say the ninjas obviously fit the kung fu aesthetic that the map goes for, but then the roller skaters fit the 70s setting that the map takes place in. Obviously, Attack of the Radioactive Thing has all the different Krogs and the Krog Brute, which really fits the 1950s monster movie aesthetic that the map is going for. And then, of course, you have the Beast from Beyond, which is just a bunch of the aliens or cryptids from Extinction. That map kind of ruined everything with the bosses, though, because they decided to just throw a bunch of the special enemies that were on the previous maps onto this map. So you have the slasher on this map, you have the clowns, the ninjas, and it kind of messed with the flow. Obviously, people, rightfully so, complain about that map for just how hectic it gets with all the different special enemies, but every other map in this game does a really good job with it. The only other special enemy I have a problem with in this game is the ninjas. I do think they were a little bit too overpowered, and they got to a point where they were just kind of annoying, but pretty much every other special enemy in this game I think is very fun to go up against, and just the diversity in how they look and how they fit the map is exactly what makes them some of the best special enemies of all time. In number 3 spot, Black Ops 2. Black Ops 2 has some incredible special enemies that fit each map so well. The only special enemy in this game that I really don't like is, of course, the denizens on transit. The denizens absolutely suck. I'm also not a huge fan of the Templar zombies on Origins, but I also don't really hate them. I would just say I'm not like a huge fan of them. But the denizens genuinely like ruin transit. They're actually something that holds that map back quite a bit. They're very annoying in the way that they jump on your face and, scratch it and just make it so it's just very difficult to actually play that map and travel from location to location without using the bus. But the Avogadro on that map I think is totally fine. I don't mind the Avogadro. When you go to Die Rise, you have the jumping jacks, which honestly I think are really, really cool. They are much better versions of the Nova Crawlers. They kind of are similar to the Nova Crawlers in the way that they look, but the fact that they jump on the walls and can even give you free perks if you spend that entire round not missing a single shot, which of course you can just not shoot any bullets by just meleeing the jumping jacks, and it is really cool to get a free perk out of that. Brutus on Mob of the Dead is iconic and really, really fun to go up against, and obviously fits the map well. He's like the warden of Alcatraz. That is just such an awesome concept. The witches on Buried are such a unique special enemy. The fact that they only spawn in the witch's house and they take your points when they hit you, which is really, really deadly. The fact that you have to really be careful when you're going through the witch's house, because of course you have to go through the witch's house to get to Pack-a-Punch, so you're going to be going there very frequently, but if you get hit too many times, you might lose all your points, which you were originally going to spend on Pack-a-Punching your weapon. That mechanic is really, really cool. And then, of course, you have the Panzer Soldat on Origins, which in my opinion is one of the best special enemies of all time. One of the most terrifying special enemies. The fact that he drops in at like round 8, and if you don't have a staff by then, it's going to be very, very dangerous. And especially with all the mud on Origins, he can definitely catch up to you and kill you. He has the grapple attack, he has a flamethrower. He is very, very deadly, but he is so, so cool. In number 2 spot, Black Ops 3. I don't think there's a single special enemy in this entire game when it comes to the new maps that I dislike. I think they are all really fun to go up against. So when it comes to like the bigger special enemies, we of course have the Margwa as well as the Elemental Margwas on Revelations. I love these guys. I think these are some of my favorite special enemies of all time. The fact that you have to perfectly time when you're going to shoot the Margwa, when it opens its specific eyes, and it's just a really cool looking boss as well. The Panzer Soldat returns on Horizon, but it's a bit different than the Origins version. I don't like it more than the Origins version, but I still think it works quite well on that map. The Thrashers on Zetsubou no Shima are quite underrated. I used to hate these guys because they do spawn in a little bit too often, but I still really enjoy them. I think they're really cool. I like how you have to shoot the different heads on the Thrasher itself. I like the fact that they can pick up somebody who's down and carry them around the map, which is just insane. And I like how you can stop a zombie from mutating to the Thrasher. You can actually avoid it from happening. If you avoid letting the zombies go into the spores in general, you can actually stop the Thrashers from spawning in as frequently as they would otherwise. So it's a pretty cool boss in general. The Manglers on Garad Krovi, I know I don't really love them anymore because they've been reused so many times, but back when they were only on Garad Krovi, I thought they were really cool. And then of course there's also a bunch of other smaller special enemies in BO3. You have the Meatballs on Shadows of Evil as well as the Parasites, and I think those work really well with the Margwa. The Hellhounds returned on Horizon. You had the Spiders on Zetsubou no Shima, the Valkyrie drones on Garad Krovi, as well as the Electric Zombies, and then you had the Furies, as well as the Corrupted Keepers on Revelations. There was just so many different special enemies throughout this game, and none of them were annoying. All of them were interesting and had unique abilities, and they presented a pretty interesting challenge to Black Ops 3. They're also thematically appropriate to the maps that they're on, especially the Spiders on Zetsubou. I think those work so well on that map. And by far in first place for the best Call of Duty Zombies game based on its special enemies is Black Ops 4. Of course, this game has some of the most content out of any zombies mode ever, so it makes sense that it would also have a lot of special enemies, and it does. And they're not annoying special enemies. They don't mess up any of the maps, at least in my opinion. I know that's kind of a hot take because a lot of people do have issues with some of these maps in terms of their special enemies. I don't. I think majority of them are nearly perfect. There is one major criticism I can give, and that's specifically on Alpha Omega. We might as well just get that right out of the way. I don't like the Nova Bombers. I mentioned before I don't like Nova Crawlers in general. I don't mind them as much in this game, but specifically the Nova Bombers do definitely have a big negative impact on Alpha Omega because they can turn off Pack-a-Punch. That really does suck, and that is a huge problem with that map, but that's pretty much the only significant negative problem I have with special enemies in this game. There is so much variety map to map when it comes to the special enemies. There's a lot of map unique ones. First of all, let's start off with the Chaos maps. 9 has the Gladiators, the Brawlers, and the Tigers, and of course you have a bunch of other special enemies as well, but some of them are on other Chaos maps as well. Voyage of Despair has the Stoker. Dead of the Night has the Werewolves and the Vampires, which again, I absolutely love how thematically appropriate these bosses are to these maps. Ancient Evil has the Giganese as well as the Skeleton Spartoi army, and then the Catalysts and the Blightfather appear on every single Chaos map, except for Dead of the Night. Dead of the Night actually does not have the Blightfather. The Catalysts are honestly some of the most underrated special enemies we've ever seen in COD. A lot of people don't like them. A lot of people say they spawn in too much, which they do spawn in a lot, but I don't think they mess with the flow of the game whatsoever. They just give you an interesting challenge to go up against. There's the Fire Catalyst, which is basically like a napalm zombie from Shangri-La, where it explodes when it gets close to you, but it walks very slow. So it's kind of balanced in that way where you're not going to have to worry about it running up on you. But if you come around a corner and it happens to be there, you got to back up because if it explodes, you're going to lose a lot of health. The Poison Catalyst just leaves behind a lot of like poisonous gas that will damage you a little bit. The Water Catalyst is really interesting because it'll actually not go after you. Instead, it will go after other zombies and increase their health, which I love that mechanic. A couple other special enemies do that as well, but I think it works really well with the Water Catalyst. You have to take it out as fast as possible so you can avoid it making the other zombies stronger. And then there's the Electric Catalyst, which every now and then will shoot out electricity right in front of itself, and if it hits you, it will kind of mess up your vision for a few seconds. I also love how the catalysts are used throughout some of the Easter egg steps in the Chaos maps in Black Ops 4. Some of the steps you have to actually get catalyst kills in specific locations in order to activate the steps. That is a very frequent thing on Voyage of Despair, and I overall just like when zombies maps do that, when they actually make these special enemies integrated with the Easter egg itself. A lot of the bosses, they know when to have them spawn in. They know that they shouldn't have them spawn in too frequently. For example, the Blightfather. The Blightfather does not spawn in that often, but when it does, it's a huge challenge. It's a very difficult boss to fight against, and that's what makes it work so well in the maps that it's in. Same thing for the werewolves. I feel like the werewolves don't spawn in that often, but when they do, they're pretty terrifying to go up against. But then of course you have the silver bullets to help you against a werewolf. So overall, the chaos maps do an incredible job with the special enemies. With the ether maps in Black Ops 4, it's not nearly as good because unfortunately there is not a single brand new enemy on any of those maps. Obviously they have the jolting jacks on Alpha Omega as well as the electric dogs, but those are just variants of other bosses. They're not like fully original. They obviously brought back Brutus on Blood of the Dead. They brought back the Hellhounds on most of the maps, but they all still work pretty well. Like I said before, of course, I don't like the Nova Bombers on Alpha Omega, but all of the other special enemies on those maps are pretty good. And having 4 chaos maps that are filled with brand new special enemies does make up for it completely. It goes above and beyond making up for it, in my opinion. And all in all, that is my ranking for every single Call of Duty Zombies game by its special enemies, just based on how good the special enemies are in each game. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comment section down below what is your list for your favorite games when it comes to the special enemies. I will see you all in my next one. Thank you all for watching. Peace out.